pleasure to introduce our next and final panel session of the day, Telecom Network Automation in an Uncertain World, sponsored by Axcent. Moderating the panel will be David Winch, Vice President of Business Development for Axcent Networks. Welcome, David, and our panel of experts who will discuss what telecom network automation is, the analytics behind it, and how it impacts your customers. They also will use it as a time to examine the impact COVID-19 is having on network automation initiatives. I want to thank David for his contribution, participation, and sponsorship of panels that Encompass shows in the past, and for this one today is very timely, very relevant, and very important. So David, thank you.
Well, thank you, Chip. Today, we're fortunate to have a diverse group of people here from Encompass to talk about the progress of telecom network automation in an uncertain world. And in order for you to get to know our panel, what I'd like to do is have each of them introduce themselves, share their role at the company they're at, their role, and then just to add a couple of things. One, what is your connection with telecom network automation today? And what does telecom network automation mean to you? Don, you want to go first?
Thanks, David. Well, welcome. It's great to be here. Don McNeil, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at GTT, going on my second month, just having transitioned over. Prior, I was the CEO of FiberLight. Here at GTT, I'm responsible for all of the engineering operations, service delivery, service assurance, and product development. So automation, from my perspective, is a big priority, and I foresee will be a big priority for the next several years. I think about automation really as helping us take the human out of normal workflows. And the two workflows from the business perspective that I'm most interested in is quote to cash and procure to purchase. It's great to be here.
All right, thank you, Don. Mark Smith, you want to go next? So Mark, we'll remember to unmute ourselves.
Hi, yes. Mark Smith from Crown Castle. Great to be here as well. I've been with Crown Castle for 14 years, supporting their wireless and wired infrastructure. Previous to that was with Sunesis. We were acquired by Crown Castle with many other infrastructure providers. Currently at Crown, I'm the Director of Network Services and Security. So I support the teams that run all of the element management systems, the network management systems, and the automation around those systems. At Crown Castle, we have a team of automation engineers that are tasked with automating workflows for the product and sales team, provisioning teams, and network operations. Automation to us has many definitions and applications. For me and our team, our focus is to reduce repetitive tasks in our daily workflows, reduce the cycle time from order to activation, and increase our operational efficiency through reducing mean time to repair and maintaining a positive customer experience.
All right, thanks, sir. Daniel, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on the panel today. Daniel Friesen, I'm the Chief Innovations Officer at IdeaTech, co-founder. IdeaTech is a fiber broadband provider in Kansas. I typically work in areas of strategy and business development for our company. From an automation perspective, you know, I feel like you know, a lot of it's already been hit from what others have said, but you know, we focus similarly on areas of reducing repetitive tasks. Also trying to work on scalability for the company. We're a small company of about 40 employees today, and so automation helps us scale and be you know, work in an environment in an industry that typically has hundreds or thousands of employees, and kind of leveraging our limited workforce with automation.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yep.
Brian, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, David. Brian Kurkowski. I'm the principal member of technical staff at First Light. I've been here 23 years through all our growth. I'm responsible for network architecture, technology, vendor selection for that technology, but also participate in our strategic acquisitions team and part of the carrier solutions group for our largest customers. And so with that, with the network side of it, automation is intrinsic to that, right? It's the piece that takes all those blinky lights and worry fans and puts them to work. And it can be either people or it can be technology. And technology and automation to me, I mean, the ultimate, right? Everybody buys on Amazon Prime. Click a button, have toys delivered. And I suppose that's the ultimate in automation, at least from my perspective. But really, it's the use of technology to reduce the man hours to accomplish a task. And that can be save 15 minutes or save 15 hours. There's a whole range of things around automation. It's not just the big push a button and things happens. So that's how I look at it.
Well, thank you, Brian. So as you can tell, we've got a diversity of carriers on here. We should have a lot of interesting, different perspectives as we talk about this topic. But I'm going to start off, Don. What's your perspective on why are service providers pursuing telecom network automation or not pursuing telecom network automation?
Yeah, thanks, David. I can tell you from the GTT perspective, first and foremost for us is, I believe and have experienced in the past that, automation done right, even if it's just in a minimal dose, if you will, across a certain component of a process, ultimately leads to a consistent positive customer experience. So from that standpoint, that's a huge driver for GTT. But equally important, obviously it's been mentioned before, it helps start to provide the opportunity for us to scale the business, and scaling the business to me means, obviously doing more with less, and which also then ultimately translates to the bottom line. So as I think about automation, it's customer experience, which also leads to, greater improvement in the profitability of specific products and services that you offer in the marketplace.
All right, thank you, Don. Now, well, let's move from the GTT perspective to a different size carrier. Daniel, what is it from an IdeaTech perspective?
Well, thanks, David. From our perspective, why we're pursuing automation, again, as I said earlier, we're looking for scalability and efficiency, every minute, every hour that we can save when we're such a small company is critically important for us. And so, if I had to boil it down, I would say scalability. And as we grow, to kind of focus on profitability and return on investment, we want to, do more with less, essentially. And so that's it in a nutshell for us, is scalability.
Okay. Mark or Brian, anything else you'd like to add to that question?
I'd just like to point out the scalability and profitability, it makes perfect sense, right? And when it's a company smaller, it's fairly easy because the systems are finite to do the automation in all different aspects. And at a GTT size, where you have a global organization and kind of a consistent product set, that makes sense too. But when you automate things, you remove flexibility. And in a commodity environment, doing the same task over and over, it lends itself to automation, but it does remove, or it makes more challenging, the ability to provide custom and we'll call it not necessarily off-the-shelf solutions, which we're seeing, First Light, is more and more as companies move out of the office, put things in the data center, put things in the cloud, move to home. Things that are normally on the shelf that we would sell to businesses and have for years, you can't do without somebody in the machine and actually figuring out how are we going to connect this, that, and the other thing. And that seems to be a trend for us, at least over the last couple of years. And definitely the last couple of months.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely echo the same responses as well. As far as Crown Castle, when you deploy a multi-layered network from the optical layer to the Ethernet layer to the routing layer, there are many different areas that need to scale with the business, such as the underpinning of the fiber, the 100 gig highways that are supporting all the routing infrastructure. So enabling automation between those layers and allowing you to maximize the network and really sweat the asset between routing and optical and fiber has really positioned a lot of companies well using automation so that they could find areas where they could expand easily and join those data points together to create new solutions for customers.
All right. Well, again, encompasses lots of size of carriers. Daniel, can you expand a little bit on how does the size of service provider impact the decision to pursue telecom network automation and its implementation?
Well, I think that's a little bit of a tough question because I think we're all pursuing similar types of automation. I think the point of, size is important to an extent because, what we may duplicate 5 times, GTT may duplicate 50,000 times. And so there's probably a larger scope of processes that we may think are kind of one time that a larger company may think are not. And so I think there's maybe kind of this funnel looking automation process list where everybody probably automates certain things in billing, and you start stacking things related to customer provisioning, and then you get into the larger the company, the more you want to automate duplicative tasks. And so I think it's just a matter of the amount of automation is somewhat correlated with the size of the business. If that makes sense.
All right. Mark, care to share something from your perspective or Crown Castle's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I know many on this panel also operate national networks that require consistency and a high degree of we call data hygiene. So making sure that the data points that we have and the products that we deploy are consistent, whether it's in California, New York, Florida, Georgia, or anywhere else in the nation. And automation ensures a consistent deployment of infrastructure and services. So these gold standards that you can deploy via automation and configs, they really build a robust and predictable network. So yes, I agree. As the network grows in size, automation can reward it with sustainability and predictability by using it to keep those human errors out of the network and deploy products and services consistently.
Okay. But Donna, Brian, anything else you'd like to add on how size impacts things?
I'd offer, just picking up on something that Brian and Dan said earlier, in the past, in the early days of automation, I can tell you, we made some mistakes where, and this was before GTT, but we made some mistakes trying to, automate too much of the process and create that rigidity that I think Brian referred to. And I agree, it's finding the, what to automate and where to automate in the right dose. Another learnings I think I'd share too is, sometimes the tendency is to, focus the automation on the shiny new object. So you roll out a new product and service, and tendency is to, run to that and automate that. Whereas the legacy, more mundane, the high volume is I find to be where the better opportunity is as it pertains to automation. So, it's, where you start and what you automate does make a big difference from my experience, both positively and negatively.
Well said.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Don. So Mark, how does telecom network automation impact the customer?
Yes, so customer experience is our top priority at Crown Castle. For us, network automation accelerates the order to activation process, allowing us to be very nimble for upgrades and augments to our customers, which we've all seen through the COVID-19 pandemic and the requests that have come in. It also rewards our customers with new products that were just spoken to earlier, such as bandwidth on demand and DDoS mitigation. These products themselves rely heavily on automation to empower the customer to make changes to their network and to have that back-end process that can do that without human intervention and give them the flexibility to utilize our network. But automation is not always associated with revenue-generating workflows. Automation can be used to verify the protection and the diversity architectures at the physical fiber levels, layers, the optical layers, the routing layers, to ensure that the network complies with customer service level agreements and reduce the negative impacts observed when the network's not performing as it's designed. So as much as we think automation is used to generate revenue or the order process, on the flip side, the operational side of the business can take just as much benefit from automation for expediting triage for when incidents happen and correlating data together to get down to the root cause and make sure that the network performs reliably.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Mark. Brian, I suspect you have an opinion here.
I think Mark went straight to the heart and the throat of the matter, so it was really well said. Generally, automation, I think, and I've seen, is a positive for the customer experience and for the performance, not just the subjective, but the objective experience. And I'm going to go down the same road that Mark did, right? I'm the one that said, hey, push a button and Amazon delivers something. But there's a whole lot of things that happen underneath that. And I think that's true in the telecom network also. Automation, we've had the most success with looking at parameters, telemetry, things that are coming out of the network to tell us, wow, we have a bad optic, or there was a change in that fiber. And then, out of millions of data points, using automation and machine learning to pick out that data point to say, hey, guy in the knock, you need to look at this and figure out what's going on. I can't, but I can tell you it's there. At least that's from an AI perspective. I see Mark nodding. So that's probably has been the most effective use of automation for FirstLight. And that trickles down to the customer. Because if we can fix the problems before the customer sees it, well, the customer gets a better experience. And then all the things that are obvious, like faster time to delivery, faster time to notification, automatic communication of status, those all fit into it. So overall, the answer to the question is automation for all of us, I think, will result in a much better customer experience at all levels of what we provide. So,
Don or Daniel, do you want to add anything?
That was good.
No, yep.
Okay. So Don, what impact, if any, is COVID-19 having on service providers in their telecom network automation journey?
I can tell you from our perspective, we talked a lot about just kind of the more traditional service activation, but with regard to the growth we've seen on the IP backbone, on the global IP backbone, just tremendous. It's also caused the opportunity to pause and think more about automation and vis-a-vis capacity planning and management. Mark made some reference to some of the bandwidth on demand and some of the bandwidth growth, but it probably would have been a little bit further down the list from my perspective. But I think also just the bursts and the ability to apply some automation in the right dose in the right place, I think was one of outcroppings, if you will, of the current situation.
How about your perspective, Daniel?
Yeah, again, very similar. Certainly looking at, it's been a great opportunity to do a reset in business operations. Certainly the kind of touchless aspect of the pandemic, as unfortunate as it is, has provided some unique opportunity to push some automations or efficiencies in processes that in the past have just traditionally required a touch. There's simple things that, from a small company perspective, such as, taking, walk-in payments and manual payments. This was a great opportunity to push, some of the most basic automation processes, such as, electronic billing, and kind of complete the transition from physical to virtual in billing. But, I think there's other aspects related to, customer installation and the automation that can occur in the second and further iterations of installations once a customer is installed, turning off existing service, initiating new service. When put under the lens of fully touchless, requires a next level of automation, especially for smaller companies that have traditionally, if we go back to that funnel, I spoke of, we're trying to move up that funnel a little bit, and certain items related to installation, for sure, can be more automated to where you don't have to go into the customer premise. And so, I think this has been good for the industry to kind of accelerate innovation in kind of computer-aided systems and automation that don't require a human and are helping in that touchless environment.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Brian, Mark, anything you'd like to add there with respect to the impact of COVID-19 on this journey?
Yeah, just to highlight the zero-touch provisioning as well. We've seen a lot of restrictions into data centers and customer buildings. So having that ability to ship out a piece of equipment to a customer and have them self-perform and install it and have its own birth certificate and register the network has been an impact for a lot of providers. And then also, reducing the exposure to our field teams, having to travel or spend a lot of significant time in those sites, provisioning and commissioning those devices. So definitely has changed a shift as well on the automation, even down to the field teams.
Yeah, it has for us also. And serving primarily business in general throughout our territory. During COVID-19, the services or even our largest businesses are starting to look more like residential services in terms of people working from home, much as we are videoing in for conferences, et cetera. And the needs of me at home in a business environment aren't that much different than me at home as a residential user. So that automation that's historically been focused towards residential, we've kind of seen, and our sales teams have told us, you need to have them available in the business environment because of what the new normal is, and what at least I believe the new normal is going to be for the foreseeable future to our business customers. So it has definitely changed the way we're looking at automation at First Light.
That new normal from home, you even have dogs trying to join video conferences, right, guys? Mark, you want to care to expand on the budgetary impact that COVID-19's had on service providers to enable telecom network automation?
Sure. traditionally, even at Crown Castle, we've always had that sustaining capital budget where you have the information technology or the information systems team that's keeping the bare metal going, keeping those sustaining telemetry applications alive and running and growing with the network. Over the past year or two, and even due to COVID, we found that having budgetary pockets within our engineering and provisioning teams, like DevOps teams, as close to the network as possible with those same skill sets have become very useful for us. We've been able to kind of bifurcate the bare metal and just the sustaining side of the IT infrastructure and rebirth more of the software, the AI, and the automation side as close to the network as possible through those engineering and provisioning teams. So this has allowed us to come up with new ideas to expedite upgrades using those teams for healthcare, education, and government verticals due to the telecommuting and virtual learning. And then also it allowed us to get different views into the network as well. So before you would rely on things like Sev1 or SolarWinds to kind of look at your telemetry and your utilization and growth, and now having those budgetary increases of DevOps teams directly within the engineering portfolio, they're able to develop new applications that help stitch the data together and create different views for whatever COVID or other type of incidents like this are driving the networks to perform at, whether it's increasing the amount of bandwidth or increasing presence in data centers and cross connects and others, utilizing those specific teams to generate those solutions with new budgets. So we are in the budget cycle now with Crown. So, fingers crossed, we do see a significant investment on the automation side. And again, that bifurcation between, what we're calling just sustaining information systems, and now these new teams that I'm sure in First Light and many other on this panel today that are more that DevOps side of the business, where the company is investing in those information technology resources directly attached to those teams that need it most, the engineering and provisioning.
Thanks, Mark. So Daniel, from an IdeaTech perspective, what's the budgetary impact of COVID-19 had on your guys' journey for automation?
Well, I think like most telecom providers, business is booming, and it's unfortunate that it has to, that it was because of a pandemic, but certainly, you got to respond to what the market brings, and in this case, similarly, we expect to invest more in automation and increase the budget on that. It's just kind of a natural, innovations process when you run up against a new challenge. In this case, COVID-19 and the shifting operational constraints associated with it. I think it's just a natural progression to shift some of what was more of a touch process and the expenditures and budget associated with that naturally shift into this touchless automation process. And so we're similar from a small company perspective, that we've kind of doubled down on our automation investment. We see just a number of innovative opportunities that maybe weren't as clear, and sometimes you have to get forced into finding these things through new challenges, and they've all been very healthy for us in developing a range of new automations, and just the telework perspective, and the ability to reach out to, it seems like vendors are as close as ever to us, and we've seen a lot of innovation lately in design automation, and where people aren't necessarily traveling to the field as much anymore, and just the design innovation for us has been game changing. And again, it's just sometimes, as much as you focus on innovation and development, something disruptive is very healthy, and I think that's the case here.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Don, Brian, anything you'd like to add with respect to budgetary impact of COVID-19 on automation?
I'm going to say the only comment I would have is that the investments we've made in those IT and DevOps, as Mark noted, have absolutely, without question, shown substantial rewards operationally, both from a financial and just overall efficiency perspective. It's worth the investment, and here's my comment on it.
I just to dovetail with that, I think the situation has provided some validation for those who may not have seen the value right away. I think it making deliberate investments going forward is definitely this has been a validation point for it.
Well, Brian, would you care to elaborate on the I guess the impact to the bottom line for telecom network automation?
Things are, budgets are tight everywhere, right? And it's not because business isn't good. I think budgets are tight because business is good. Right? What's the good news? We're selling lots of things, and what's the bad news? We have to deliver it. So, and that goes with construction, IT, and automation. So any dollar that can be saved, and Daniel really kind of hit on it earlier in here with a plan. If you have that plan that gets the various steps of the process to a level of efficiency, right? Until you get to that point of diminishing returns, that ultimately trickles upstream to the bottom line. The faster and more effectively you can develop a fiber to the premise design for the sales team or for the operations team. I put this cable here versus that cable there, which is very difficult by hand, but in an automated environment is easy to do in little dribs and drabs, ultimately feeds to the bottom line. And it's been kind of surprising how minor changes in the process driven by automation, whether it be GIS, whether it be just inventory and overlays of hotspots in terms of demographics automatically, instead of having somebody looking at colors on a map, the results that have yielded. So can I quantify it to a dollar? No, I can't. But I can say there's absolutely been a bottom line impact to the positive with respect to using the technology that's available and applying it to how we build and operate our networks, especially when you got a lot of demand, which there is right now.
Don, what would you like to add to that?
I think one of the most interesting parts of automation is really the preparation to get there. So what I mean by that is you really can't take advantage of automation unless your data, you have a high degree of data accuracy, integrity to it. So in the preparation work, kind of that, I think Mark used the term hygiene, which is a personal favorite of mine. As you go through that process, it's pretty illustrative to start to help understand where your costs are. And what I mean by that, whether it's operational costs, so for example, as you're digging into every nook and cranny of the network, you may start to find you have excess power feeds, for example, on the electrical side. So there's grooming opportunities. Similarly, you may find out that from a CapEx perspective, as you get better visibility and transparency in the data, you may have more capacity, thereby, deferring and pushing off some capital investments. So I think that's part of the journey, if you will, but it also starts to help illustrate, and I think also start to point, companies in directions as to, where you begin, because I do think it makes a lot of difference, as Daniel referred to as well, where you start. And then, fundamentally, you can see it, just in even, modest process automations or workflows, just in the rework. GTT in particular, we're dependent on partner networks. So if I'm sure many have lived the dream of good old-fashioned telecom, ordering services from one another. The minutia, the complexity. When the data is not right, you got to supplement the order, you got to expedite the order. So all of those little fees add up, and all of that traces back to not having the right accuracy. But certainly, quality, rework, and then, as we said throughout this conversation, I think as well, all of this equates to improving the customer experience, which I believe translates to growth. So those would be my ads.
All right, Daniel or Mark, anything you'd like to add there?
Well, yeah, I might just mention one thing on profitability. It's so easy to think every idea is a good one, and you can get out of control in your automation investment, especially when you have when you have a creative development team that gets their head down and they're just developing, and we've had a situation multiple times before where there is, as Brian mentioned, this diminishing returns evaluation that you constantly need to do, and there's been situations where we wake up and we're developing things that have been canned and developed by 20 other companies, and the amount of investment we've put in just to do the basic development and automation could have been purchased and implemented a year previous. And so that's been a challenge for us, especially as a small company who kind of relies on the autonomy of our employees, and sometimes we wake up and we're on the wrong side of the diminishing returns equation.
All right, thanks, Daniel. So Brian, where should service providers focus on automating their network? I mean, is there one place to start?
Daniel just really hit it, interestingly. Evaluation, right? You ask yourself the question, how do you guarantee you have heart surgery? And you ask a heart surgeon about what to do about your sore finger, right? Heart surgeons like to cut, and that's how they make their money. And DevOps teams like to develop, and automation teams like to automate. So figuring out what the plan is, evaluating what's out there for off the shelf, which that really, by the way, thank you, Daniel, that really resonated with me, the comment, I could have just bought that for like $2,000 and we just spent, 1,000 hours developing it. I think knowing what's on the planet, what's available to you, having a plan of where you're going to go and what you're trying to get to, and more importantly, how each of those steps is actually going to drop to the bottom line. Is it worth the investment? Do you want to do it? And when you have that master plan, develop the key pieces so they all fit together. It's a great thing. Well, I've got a great tool. It does great things, and it doesn't work with any other single thing we have anywhere in the company, I think, are the pieces. So evaluation of where you want to be, the plan, and then list it, write down. What's the biggest bang for my buck? Maybe it's not automating the network. Maybe it's a better credit card processing system, as somebody mentioned earlier, or something not as obvious as something that automates GIS updates. Where's your biggest bang for your, and then follow the plan and don't go down rabbit holes. And I think I'll end there.
Thanks, Brian. Mark, you got something to add there?
Yes, all great points. So definitely automation is a journey with a very dynamic roadmap. So we invested a significant amount of time developing that initial roadmap, and by the end of that year, we were basically working on a new roadmap after that, after we purchased our different investments for software at the different layers. We found that what worked best was Crown on the whole for their digital transformation had developed a business performance team that was kind of an intake funnel. So once we did set up and invest and do all the sunk costs in the different systems and develop the APIs that would tie data together and the different database integrations, it was really the intake funnel that had the breadth of the entire company's needs, the sales needs, the operations needs, the provisioning needs, the needs of the NOC and the field teams, to then take a look at what are those big bang for your buck investments that we should do and augment these softwares to do for the different vendors we have at the different layers in the network to get good return for the company. And I think without that intake funnel and that breadth of the entire company to understand what all the needs are and how we can focus on, the top 20 projects out of the 200 in the funnel that are going to deliver the best return, really helped us expedite our automation efforts. Without that funnel, we would have, been just developing over and over and over again and potentially redeveloping code for, different purposes. So the intake funnel is definitely a necessity to filter out those products. And then the other piece is for those outliers that do need to get done, we took the more agile approach for the MVP or that minimum viable product. So yes, we may need to develop something small from an automation perspective for a one-off or for something that's for a smaller need, but can reclaim cycles to the business. But just develop the base for it, get it out into the market, let them play with it. And then when we free up more cycles from the other projects, we can continue to build on that MVP. So those two approaches have helped us really define our roadmap, our dynamic roadmap that's ever changing and growing, but get the focus in the right areas, but then also be able to be agile and do those MVPs for some of the business needs that pop up here and there.
Well, thanks, Mark. Don, Daniel, care to add anything to that question? So Don, let me ask this question. What do you see as the most significant gaps to achieving a more automated network? And we've talked about this way. Any other thing you'd like to add on where COVID-19 is playing a role in that?
Yeah, I touched on it before. I think in the preparation and the readiness, one of the biggest things, and not unique to GTT from my past experiences, is the data integrity. The completeness and the accuracy of the underlying data that describes, the logical and physical, network, the depiction of the network. So that in particular, really limits how far you can go and where you should start with regard to automation. But yeah, I think that's one. And then, one that I think a lot about too is where we're so dependent upon partner networks. It's also having the ability for that automation to, just like network interfaces flow across network to network interfaces at the physical and the layer 2, layer 3. Similarly, you need to start thinking about that same flow, although it happens through electronic bonding and things like that. But certainly there's more work to do there. So my biggest one, I think, is the data.
Okay. Brian, what would you care to add?
That's the gorilla in the room, the data, and it's expanded upon that problem because most of the panelists here, the companies that we're talking about, are acquisitive, right? So they're an aggregate of a number of companies. Mark had talked about CSuite to Crown Castle, and certainly First Light has acquired a number of entities over the last couple of years, and I know GTT has. And everybody does things differently. So even though the data may be there, it's in a different format. You're facing, hey, I've got a really great system, as Mark talked about. We developed 20 processes, they work great. And I bought somebody and it doesn't work with any of that. And that there's a challenge that goes with that. So it's not just the data, because there's only so many vendors that sell to the telecom industry, right? So we can all name them. But the challenge comes even from the vendors themselves. Inside, if you're committed to a given equipment manufacturer, you would think that the capability and data between one or two different product lines from the same manufacturer would generally look the same. Yeah, they don't. Different versions of code, different capability sets, different telemetry, and oh, we upgraded and they got rid of a version of something that I really needed to get something else because they ran out of memory space, and now my systems are broken. So the challenges are twofold. The biggest one by far, in my mind, is data. The quality of the data that you have and that's coming from the network. And the second one is the inconsistency of what you're seeing, even across versions from a given vendor. When you're trying to automate something, it kind of is tough when things keep changing. It's the never-ending story. And we've seen that as a particular problem in the last year as we've kind of really dug into this.
I guess this is as good a point as any. Kenny Dutton would say I would be remiss, if I wouldn't share and offer Axcent Network services to help in the analysis, planning, and execution of cleaning up data of any of your networks or any of the people listening. And I would just be negligent of not informing people of that. So, but anyway, before Mark, Daniel, anything else you'd like to add on this significant gap issue?
Definitely the data. I think the one that became very apparent for us is just simply locations. There's a USPS location address, there's a silly code address, there's a lat long address, and then there's whatever the sales guy wanted to call it when he entered it into the opportunity. So just reconciling addresses across all of our assets, has been a significant challenge. And then to Brian's point and Don's, you go to order a type 2, you need to speak the same language for a location to make sure we're talking about the same building and sublayer. So the data and the data hygiene is critical for automation initiatives.
Okay. So let's go to the human side of this. And I mean, no matter we're talking about automating, we're trying to automate things to cut human costs, but at the same time, humans have got to help us get it done. So organizing to get it done. Daniel, anything you'd like to share on the issues around organizing for a telecom network effort, as well as how COVID-19 is impacting that?
Well, I was thinking about this question. I mean, it's not unlike any other aspect of the business and how COVID-19's affected it. I don't think, impact to automation is different than the rest of operations. There's a number of things that, from an organizational perspective, have been made easier through kind of breaking through the barrier, whether it's a stigma or taboo or whatever, just things that we thought were not effective, getting forced to do them has been beneficial. And so that transcends way beyond just automation. But, certainly I think a lot of the industry has found the benefits and efficiency of working from home, from working remotely, and some of those other things. And so I look at it fairly high from a macro point of view, that this ability to question the way we've done things and the opportunity and kind of this a lot of people have let their guard down. People that have been obstructive in the development process have now, with what's going on and just the significance of it, they're like, okay, let's try something new. And so I think it's opened a lot of people that were a little less innovative and a little less open to change, when they're forced to do this in the rest of their life, you know, making a little change in their at their business isn't as big of a deal. And so I think that's been a great impact for the entire gamut of operations, including automation.
Mark, what would you like to add as far as organizing for automation and impact of COVID-19 there?
Yeah. So I had one example, and going back to that dynamic roadmap we were talking to earlier. At the bottom of my list is deprovisioning. So as much as we talk about provisioning new assets from order to activation, through the COVID-19 process and different orders that were coming through, we saw the necessity to take a look at the deprovisioning backlog and figure out, well, how do we reclaim some of those assets for 10 gig ports where customers are now asking to go from 1 gig to 10 gig, and we can, you know, deploy new switches into those POPs and data centers, which will take time, versus just going through that backlog, basically doing the automation in reverse and reclaiming those VLANs, reclaiming those ports and those assets. So as we were organizing for figuring out how to increase and handle the volume that was coming in through the COVID-19 driven orders, we were also kind of going into the skeletons of the closet and trying to figure out, well, how do we use automation to deprovision some of those stranded assets and reclaim some of those ports that, you know, we need to use today to get a circuit up within 24 or 48 hours. So that was definitely something new for me. I had that one on the back burner for probably 2 years out to figure out, and it became very apparent that reclaiming assets was a strategic thing for this year, and to you know, put those to use and not to leave them stranded anymore.
Okay. Don, Brian, anything you'd like to add?
I'd just reiterate what Daniel touched on, which was, you know, kind of the cultural, the mindset shift of, you know, the necessity to do things differently across the board. I think has been a great stimulus or shock to, you know, thinking about automation and thinking more broadly about how the business needs to operate. So I think that was a great point and agree completely with it.
I want to thank Mark for making me feel like I'm not the only person in the world who sent somebody in the CO to see what lights were not blinking because we did not have sufficient automation on the reclamation either. So you're not alone in that. And yes, I agree with you. Thank you.
Good.
Well, the next question I had prepared, I think everybody's answered. It had something to do with the ability to get the right data in the right place for analytics. I think I'm just going to skip that one. I think that's been well answered already. Don, how do you see blockchain technology fitting into telecom network automation, or does it?
Yeah, from my standpoint, I'm pretty excited about what it can do down the road. You know, as I transition from a fiber-based company more focused on digging dirt and putting fiber in the ground to, you know, getting back now into more of the networking and being more reliant on, you know, other network operators and, you know, the purchase of services as well as the exchange of data and voice traffic. I know a lot of the global providers have started a lot of initiatives in the usage domain. You know, that is, how do you true up the exchange of voice minutes and that sort of stuff. But as you think more and more about, you know, procuring, you know, what we all kind of call type 2 services, you know, just you know, the speed, the accuracy, and being able to have that virtual ledger and being able to compress the cycle from order to procure to bill, I think it's you know, the telecom space is ripe for, you know, the implementation of a technology such as blockchain. I think we should be a poster child, in my opinion. And I know there's some efforts with regard to, you know, some of the bill presentation companies as well as the clearing houses. Those would be natural points. I think that you know, something like this would be implemented. So it's good to see it's in the ideation and in some cases maybe making its way to the roadmap. But you know, pretty excited about what that could do as yet another step in you know, in the context of automation.
Anybody else have anything else they'd like to add to that question? Well, I want to think of, I didn't see anybody respond. So I want to thank all the panel members for being here today. As we close out, I don't know if you have any final word you'd like to say, or any thought that's come to mind that, you know, of any unasked question or anything you'd like to share. I'll start with you, Brian, as we finish up here.
Oh, no, I think we kind of covered the automation side of things, but it is absolutely a journey. It is not an event, and something that just has to be worked on. I think, as everybody here has said, find those areas with the biggest bang, dive into them. But the experience has been, it is worth the investment. It is just a long journey to get there in many cases.
How about you, Daniel?
No, you know, the one thing that came to mind, you know, on the additional questions list, it was, you know, where we thought we were as a business from 1 to 10, and you know, my thought was, as Brian mentioned and Don and Mark both alluded to this is a journey, and I think it's an infinite one. You can never, you'll never be finished with automation, and so, you know, I don't think you'll ever get to a 10, you know. I think, and in regards to that, you probably should try to shoot for an 8, because if you're shooting for a 10, you're probably, you know, on that other side of the diminishing returns equation that we talked about earlier. So that's what I'd leave the panel with. I appreciate the opportunity, David, and it was a pleasure to be with the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Dan. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, same thing. It was a pleasure to chat with everybody up here and share our experiences on the automation journey. Yeah, and the big takeaway I think that all of us concluded on was definitely the data integrity and data hygiene, right? It all comes down to how confident you are in your data, which then drives, you know, what you think you can automate without breaking something or compromising the network. So hearing that a lot of the panelists have the same stories in the journey as well is encouraging. And, you know, I'm sure there's going to still be plenty of innovation and ideation as we move through this pandemic and into better better times. So thank you again for the time.
Great. And a final word, Don?
Greatly enjoyed getting a chance to meet with everyone and the dialogue, and very informative from my perspective. Gave me some great things to think about as well. And you know, as was said, you know, it's a journey, and whether it ends or not, I agree, it probably won't. But I still see, as an industry, very early part of the journey, and a long way to go. And I think for me, this is solving these sorts of problems is the fun part. So really look forward to continuing the journey with everyone.
Thank you all very much.